Hi, everyone, and welcome to today's panel discussion around automation and AI in pharmacy, Pharmacy 2025. Tonight's all about technology and automation and how that's going to impact pharmacy practice. I know we've been talking about AI and automation for a long time, and for a while, AI was, for example, an abstract idea of something that might happen. But now, as you'll find out, it's happening and it's actually in some PMR systems and it's making decisions for us. So what's the legal view of that? How will it impact your practice, and where do we stand if something goes wrong? On our panel tonight, we have Gary Parikri. I think I'll let Gary introduce himself because he's got a really good background from chemist and druggist to his own company as on the Pharmacist 24. We also have Paul Summerfield, a trained barrister, pharmacist, locum pharmacist, and also ex-superintendent. We all have Tariq Mohammed. He's the founder of Invitech and Titan PMR system, which is currently using AI to enhance the PMR system and improve efficiency. Get the words out. Efficiency in the pharmacy. So I'm going to first invite our panel to introduce themselves and give us a bit more background about what they do. So Gary, starting off with you, to tell us a bit more about your background and Pharmacist 24 and Hubs for Innovations.
Hi to everyone, and thanks for kind of joining in this evening. Kind of very briefly, I originally qualified as a pharmacist back in the late 1980s and practiced as a community pharmacist for around kind of 13, 14 years, mostly as a kind of locum and a manager. But I actually quite liked the locum life because you got to experience lots of different situations and see how things worked. And so, yeah, I did that from kind of when I qualified in the late 80s through to about 2001. And then I saw an advert for a job at the C&D and I thought, how difficult can that be? I applied, and I have to admit, it's probably been one of the best career switches for me. And I joined as a reporter, and you get to see pharmacy from the other side. You get to have contacts at the Department of Health that you wouldn't normally have. People in kind of pharmacy organisations would tell you things that you'd see how the profession was developing from the others, rather than being a grassroots. So I was there, I kind of reported for a few years, and they kept offering me promotions. I kept saying yes, and suddenly I'm editor, and I was editor for about 7 or 8 years at C&D. And I was there at the time that we went through the digital transformation and went from kind of print to digital, launched the C&D Awards, C&D Senate, and lots of other things. So it was quite an interesting time when I was there, and we were kind of responsible for launching investigations and campaigns which C&D hadn't done previously. And then I was there 16, 17 years, left at about 2016, and ended up starting a automation company with one of my friends from uni. And so we set up a company called Hub and Spoke Innovations, and what we supply, something which some of you may have seen already, are 24/7 automated collection units. So once your prescription is dispensed, patients can collect them 24/7 from a collection machine, much like a cash machine. And there's probably now about 100 or so in the UK, and probably around under 500-600 across Europe. So it's becoming relatively popular as people start to see the benefits and they understand how to integrate it into their workflow. And hopefully I can kind of explain a bit more about that as the panel discussion goes on, and answer some questions on those as well.
Sure. Thanks for the intro. And to be honest, I think the automation and this and the self-collection, that's an interesting area. I know it's happened in Canada a while ago, back in the early 90s, and there was a big issue around whether it's safe, whether it reduces contact with the pharmacist. But we'll get into a bit more detail around that afterwards. So Paul Summerfield, tell us a bit more about yourself and your background and how you became a trained barrister.
Yeah, of course. Thank you. And thank you for inviting me on here tonight. And I'd like to welcome everybody who is not only on the panel, but also who has joined us for this discussion. I qualified originally as a pharmacist in '97, and in line with what Gary did, locum straight off the bat. And I still locum today. I've held various roles. You mentioned that I have been a superintendent pharmacist. One-man band, for want of a better phrase. But I'm still superintendent pharmacist for just under 2 years. I've been a support pharmacist, and I'm also a lecturer at the University of Reading. In relation to the law side, started off very early on after qualifying, went all the way through a undergraduate law degree, postgraduate masters, ended up studying at the University of West of England, or the bar course as it was then, and gained that qualification in 2007. Set up my own company in 2012 to advise and represent registrants of all healthcare professions in front of their regulator if they become subject to an investigation for whatever reason. And so I now mix the three up. It's local community pharmacist, lecturer, and also a representative for registrants. So it's quite an interesting mix. What I do, if I don't mind saying myself, keeps me busy, keeps me very busy. I'm well known on the Telegram network through the TPC Telegram groups. And it's an absolute pleasure to be on this panel tonight.
And you've recently joined the RPS English board as well, right?
I have, yes. Very surprisingly, I got voted onto the English Pharmacy Board and now have taken up that position, and I will be there until June 2024. Cool.
Thanks for the intro, and we'll bring you later try and get your opinion on the legal sides of automation and where pharmacists stand if something does go wrong, and what your views are as a local pharmacist when you'll inevitably be working with these automated services. So, last but not least, Tariq Mohammed, you've got an interesting company. Tell us a bit more about yourself and how you got into developing the PMR system, Titan.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, and welcome to everyone, and thank you for having me here. So I interestingly qualified many years ago. In fact, next Monday, I was just working out, it's going to be 29 years to the day since I qualified as a pharmacist. I think it's fair to say that probably who I am today and what I'm doing and the work I'm doing in Titan is probably defined from that moment when I first qualified as a pharmacist. I mean, I came out kind of being a super clinical pharmacist, and my background was hospital and all the rest of it, so very much, finding ourselves where we become, out of university, we're kind of super educated, skilled and everything else. And my first encounter with community pharmacy was actually when I qualified and I went into locuming, rightly or wrongly. So I did locums, and I think it's that moment when you walk in and you kind of realize it kind of hits you like a train, that the reality of the job that you're doing does not match the skill that you've just come out with. And I think that frustration that I felt, and I know I was part of the BPSA and, fellow peers at the time, I think that frustration that you feel is that, hang on a minute, I didn't sign up to this. This is not what I thought I was going to be doing. You try to use your skills as a pharmacist to intervene on a prescription with a doctor and he shouts down at you. You try to kind of, utilize something and say, well, hang on, I know everything about drugs, ask me, but it's kind of really not appreciated in that sense. So in that moment, I think in the early days of my qualification and doing the locums and going around and kind of reflecting on where I was, it was kind of a moment where I was actually about to kind of leave the whole job, saying, let's go and do something else. But it was, I decided to stay. I decided to open my own pharmacy. I opened a business called, where everyone else was calling themselves Lloyd's the Chemist, Boots the Chemist back in the day. I opened a business called Pharmacy Plus because the objective was to bring back pharmacy to pharmacy, bring pharmacy home. So I think, and I started, and I won't bore you with the details, but what started with one pharmacy where actually we got rid of all the retail and all of the superfluous stuff that pharmacies become associated with, and said, look, let's make pure pharmacy, clinical pharmacy in the community. So that was the kind of journey that I went on. And that what started with one shop ended up with 2, 3, 4. I ended up with 25 pharmacies fairly early on. And I think it's through that journey of trying to be very pure in your pharmacy, and then suddenly the reality of pharmacy hits you, the day job of running a pharmacy business. So now I've gone away from being the puerile pharmacist to the pharmacy contractor, where you kind of experience all the issues with operations, with margin, with you're on the other side of the fence now with locums, and you're running pharmacies, employees and everything else. And I think it was at that time that I needed systems. I needed somebody to run my business. And it was that moment when I went out to the PMR companies and said, look, I need a system to help me run this chain of 25 shops. And it's really that reality, number 2, hits that the technology is not there. So my journey into technology was driven by the need to make technology because I needed to run a business. And we started building, our own technology in my business to run our shops. But I think the other thing to mention is that the moment we started building our own technology, that was the point of liberation. Because now, actually, we had technology. It was like this world had opened up because we were not at the hands of anyone else. We were liberated to do what we wanted to do. So we kind of, it's through that journey we've created warehouse pharmacies, we created operations, we brought in innovations. And the innovations we brought in were to deal with problems. So the problems I had, very common to every one of you here, safety, making sure the right drug goes out to the right patient. And that's when we kind of innovated barcode scanning. So we were the first to bring in barcode scanning in a pharmacy, never heard of before. So, through that whole journey, we built technology, built in all of these processes, scanning. We even built the first EMR system to care homes in the mid-noughties. So, the whole passion was really to drive pharmacy forward, and using technology was the most liberating part. Wind on to where I am today. So I don't have that pharmacy business, but what we do have is the technology. So what Titan is effectively taking that experience of all of those years of what happens in the real world, but then saying, look, guys, we've been through this, we can help you with it. And just on that point about AI, and we'll talk about it, we developed this kind of concept back in the day. We were running pharmacies with masses of volume, with using algorithms to carry out processes, thereby releasing pharmacists and so on. So we'll touch on some of those processes, and I'll refer back to some of my experiences there as well.
Well, thanks. I think that is an interesting story, and I think you're right. And a lot of the what we do in the community pharmacy, I think it's very arcane. We're still paper-based. We're in 2020, 21, and we're still using paper to run a pharmacy, prescriptions and everything else. And we have pharmacists that print out reams and reams of e-tokens, which is complete waste of paper. At this stage, there shouldn't be any manual processes in a pharmacy, because everything can be done through automation, through robots, or through the use of software. Just want to get back to Gary on a point. How do you see hub and spoke and products such as PharmaSelf 24 changing community pharmacy landscape?
It's not our product that changes the landscape. It's ultimately the people who work in the sector that change the landscape. Things like the PharmaSelf are just a tool that allow you to do parts of your job better. And much like no one handwrites a label anymore, everyone uses a PMR because it just frees up so much resource. Otherwise, you'd be spending all day labeling. And if you've got a very high volume pharmacy dispensing 20, 30,000 items a month, you've probably got a dispensing robot, because it frees capacity to allow the team to develop and do different things. And it's the same with our machines. They effectively free capacity to do the things that your particular business requires you to do. So the machines are just a tool, and it's a tool that allows the pharmacy team to maybe free capacity, re-engineer the way they work, and be able to actually implement some of the other business objectives they need to grow that particular business.
So explain exactly how does the PharmaSelf 24 actually work? So if I'm in a pharmacy, I've checked and bagged a patient's medication up, and instead of putting it on the shelf, I'll put it into your pharmacist.
Yeah. So currently, when you're dispensing, the last, you're dispensing a prescription for John Smith, and the last part of the dispensing is you either hand the bag to him because he's standing at the counter, or you put it on a shelf behind you, and he comes back at some other time, and you go and find the bag and hand it out. Okay. And the way, what people use our machines for are really automating the handing out of those prescriptions, where, if we're honest, the patient contact is really minimal, because 80% of our prescriptions are repeats, and 80% of those 80% are repeats where there's no material change either in the patient's condition or the medication they've had for the last 6 months. But honest, our only interaction is, can I check your name and address, please? And you kind of hand it out. And so a lot of our customers, those are the bags they automate. So we now have integrations with quite a few PMRs, hopefully more coming downstream. So as you label the prescription for John Smith, it will automatically be flagged up for going in the machine. The PMR creates a barcode that it's unique to that particular bag for that patient, and it's printed on there. And at the end of the morning rush or the afternoon rush, you may have 30, 40, 50 bags ready to be collected. Someone can take them over to the machine. They scan the barcode. The pharmacist and the PMR system will just communicate in the background and share the information. So you're simply telling the machine, this bag belongs to this patient, and this is their mobile number. You load the bag, a text message goes to the patient, and it tells him his prescription's ready for collection, tells him how long he's got to collect, gives him a PIN number for that collection, and tells him if he's going to pay for that collection. And then he can come 24 hours a day whenever he wants to come and collect.
Okay. And some might say, yes, 80% of the people don't probably need their contact or don't need the advice, but aren't you reducing the chances of that contact happening in the first place by putting it into an automated machine?
No, the machine doesn't.
It further reduces that chance.
No, the machine doesn't stop you doing anything. See, the machine doesn't say to the pharmacist, you can't speak to that patient, you can't contact them. If you need to speak to them before you load the bag, you've got their mobile number, you can call them. So let me kind of put it into context. So, I can remember, it's been quite a long while since I practiced. In fact, I'm now not on the register. And the busiest pharmacy I ever worked in was a pharmacy doing about 700 items a day. And it was quite well staffed. There was me, there were 2 dispensers and a pre-reg. And it was like a production line, one person labeling, 2 people fetching bags, making them up, me doing the final check and handing it out. The door would open at 8:30 in the morning, and at 8:35, there was a queue of 15 people. And there was a queue of 15, 16 people up until 5 minutes before we closed at 6:30. Constant all day. And I'd go home and I'd think, that person, did I make time to tell them about whatever I was going to tell them about that prescription? And honestly, sometimes you just couldn't remember who it was you spoke to. And, you had to make sure in the 60 seconds that you had with each patient, you covered off everything you wanted to do. And so that you wouldn't worry about it the following night. So did I actually cover that off with that patient? And I suspect there are lots of kind of pharmacies kind of working like that, where, it's very busy, high volume, and they're not automated. And it's actually, giving time to the people that actually need the extra advice. So that was as an example, my business partner, Richard, he was the first person in the UK to install a collection machine 10 years ago. And so his pharmacy now, it's the busiest bricks and mortar pharmacy in the UK. He dispenses 53,000 items a month. So you can imagine what it might be like. Mm-hmm. And if you walk in there, it barely feels like it does 3,000 or 4,000 items a month. So he's got a dispensing machine which manages to stock, fetches stuff off the shelves, and he's got 3 collection machines out the front. And he has somewhere between 1,500 and 2,000 people a week who collect from the machines. So for the patient, it's really convenient, but for him, it's massively freed up his team to be able to contact people when they want, talk to them about services they're about to offer advice on the medication they've got. It doesn't stop you from doing anything. It simply frees up capacity for you to do the other things that you need to do, whether it's speak to people, have a phone consultation or whatever, but you've got the time and capacity to do it. He must have 200, 300, 400 people a day who collect from the machine. So if you think to hand out a bag takes 2-3 minutes, times that by 300-400, that's quite a lot of hours you can free up in a day to do the other things that we need to do.
Mm-hmm. Just want to bring Paul into this. What's your legal views on the responsibility of a pharmacist if a bag of the medicine is given out after the pharmacist signed out? Because if you're a local, or even if you're a pharmacy manager and you're working somewhere for 1 day a week or 2 days a week, you're away for at 6 p.m. You load up everything in the vending machine, and someone comes and collects it after hours. If something does go wrong, if there's an error on the prescription, in your legal view, whose responsibility would that be?
Well, it all boils down to who was the responsible pharmacist at the time it was assembled into that bag and placed into that machine. That is the basic breakdown of it. So say, for example, I'm a pharmacist. I'm in one of these pharmacies that has a collection point, as has been described by Gary. If a mistake is made on that prescription and I am the RP, it is my responsibility. I'm responsible for the safe and effective sale and supply of medicines when that medication has been assembled and has been checked. So the responsibility rests upon my shoulders, to be honest. That happens whether it's handed out at a counter, it's handed out at a dispensing point, or a vending machine. Happens if it's delivered. The responsibility still rests with the pharmacist who was signed in as RP. They will be the go-to person. It is then up to that pharmacist to turn around and say, well, hold on. There was another pharmacist who was checking. I was a responsible pharmacist, or another pharmacist checked that. Or there has been an issue with the vending machine. There's been an issue with the delivery. And it's up to that pharmacist then to raise those matters, to try and mitigate their liability as the responsible pharmacist.
Okay. And I suppose the superintendent won't take any responsibility for this. It's purely on the pharmacists themselves if there is an issue.
Again, what companies would say was, well, it's, the standard operating procedures are used as a sword and a shield. And so, it would be a response would be, it was outside of the SOP, or the SOP wasn't followed correctly, and therefore that absolves the company to some extent of any liability towards the person who may be injured, and I stress may be injured. It's not a foregone conclusion from any medication errors that have occurred at the point of collection. Because you can place them back and it will be either a clinical check that's not being performed correctly, it will be accuracy check that hasn't been performed correctly. There could be a number of things. Of course, going back further, there could be a number of other things which has caused a breakdown in the accuracy checking or the clinical checking, etc. So, we could spend an evening just talking about this one point. We're not here to just talk about legal liabilities. But it is the responsibility of the responsible pharmacist to ensure the safe and effective sale and supply of medicines, irrespective of how they're picked up.
Okay.
So if I can just add something to that. So Paul's right. So dispensing errors, and if they occur, it's whether it's collected in a delivery van or whether it's collected in a collection point or over the counter doesn't make any difference. The dispensing error occurred at some point in the assembly. One of the kinds of errors that the machine does eliminate is a handing out error. And my God, we've all handed out the wrong bag to the wrong person. Now, I've been in there and I've called out a name and address, and somebody completely different comes in and you say, "Is this your name and address?" And they say yes, and you take the bag and you walk out, and then the real person stands up and says, "That was me," and you think, "Oh my God." So with collection machines, you don't have collection errors because the machine can only give the bag to the data that you've entered. So as long as entering the data into a collection machine is the same as entering data into a PMR. If you can enter data correctly into that, you can enter data correctly to this. And actually, with interfaces, you don't even have to enter the data; it's already there. And so it removes collection. It removes kind of handing out errors completely. If the data is correct, the machine can't decide to give it to someone else. And if you can suddenly remove, 100 people a day from queuing, it creates also inside the pharmacy a much calmer environment. Because part of the problem with errors, whether they're dispensing errors or handing out errors, is the general kind of noise and activity that happens within a pharmacy. You can look over the counter and there's a queue of people starting to form at the counter. You feel a little pressure. And in a lot of places, you don't have the privacy of the kind of dispensing area. People can I've worked in places where people could look straight over and look into the dispensing bench. And that just makes you feel a bit uncomfortable, puts you under stress from the word go. So, if you can remove some of those queues, it has an added benefit in terms of creating a level of calmness in the pharmacy.
Yeah, actually, I think you're right. I mean, the collection side is quite an important, because there've been so many instances where I've called out a name and literally somebody completely different. It was for a female, and a male patient came in and said, "Oh yeah, that's me." I read it out again. "Oh no, that's not me." So yeah, I think that's a really important side that can be eliminated with this. But just want to go back to Paul again. As you work as a locum pharmacist, and a lot of locum pharmacists are generally uncomfortable with losing control of the pharmacists. We like to be in control of the whole environment, because we are ultimately responsible for everything that we do on the day. As a locum pharmacist, would you be comfortable with working in a pharmacy which has a collection point, where somebody can come and collect the medication, say, in the middle of the night, when you're not available to speak to the patient, or where they can't ask any questions?
It unnerves me slightly. Amongst us, we've got probably over 100 years of experience between us as pharmacists, to be honest, and it unnerves me slightly. The way that it is viewed is that a pharmacist should be in a position to intervene at any point, including handout. Now, say for example, a patient has a question. They get home. It's 1:00 in the morning. They open their bag of medication. Something's missing. There's an assembly error has occurred. A labeling error has occurred. It hasn't been picked up. It's 1:00 in the morning. Who do they contact? There's not going to be a pharmacist on the end of a telephone 24 hours a day to be able to correct that error. If the patient thinks that they need that medication, they may take it. But, it's going to be an error which has occurred on a shift where there's been a responsible pharmacist. Therefore, it will be seen as their error. Email, text is not an infallible system. Things go wrong. So the wrong code may be sent to the correct patient. They may pick up another patient's medication. I agree, it is going to be incredibly rare, but it may happen. What are the consequences of that? Until I am comfortable with the technology, until I am assured that, yes, it is almost infallible, there will always be, in my mind, this nagging question of, well, if it potentially could go wrong, what if it does go wrong? So I would be uncomfortable. So I would need further reassurance in relation to the likelihood of, say, a vending machine breaking down, or a deep learning or an AI or a machine learning system going wrong. Nothing is infallible. If one thing we're taught, systems can and often break down at some point. Mm-hmm. But it's my responsibility. So I'm not comfortable with that. And I've worked in pharmacies where there have been collection machines and things have gone wrong. Things have gone wrong. The machine's broken down. It's the wrong code that's been sent to the patient. The wrong thing's been put in, and it's the person who's putting it in. The wrong thing has been put in. Yes, we can mitigate against that and we can put systems in place, but it may still happen. And that's the issue that I have. It may still happen. Therefore, as a responsible pharmacist, I wouldn't be comfortable until I'm completely reassured that everything is in place. But I would also want to be reassured as well that if I'm locking the door at 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock at night, mm-hmm. and if the machine does break down, or if it's on a deep learning or AI algorithm for something picking with, I'm not there, I'm not going to be responsible, because I certainly don't want that responsibility of not knowing what's going on when I'm not there.
And I think now that we're on the topic of AI and deep learning, I want to bring Tarek into the conversation. I've said it before, I'm a big fan of your PMR, so I think you've done some really wonderful stuff with it. And it's a very forward-thinking system, the way we've designed it in terms of reducing the errors and using barcode at every stage. It has reduced a lot of the errors in dispensing and picking. Just wanted to ask you, your system uses AI to do clinical checks. Tell us a bit more about this, the type of AI that you use, and how that improves efficiency.
Sure. Okay. If I can just, I'll definitely answer that question, but if I can just go back and maybe just pick up on some of the points that Gary and Paul raised about handing out. I think, look, we as, the audience here and we as pharmacists, need to just go back a couple of stages and just ask ourselves, are we happy with pharmacy as it is? I think there's some fundamental principles of us actually being honest to ourselves and say, look, do we actually want to change? Do we want a different world for ourselves? Do we want, are we satisfied with the fact that we are suppliers of medicines, distributors of medicines, as we were called? Or do we see a bigger purpose for our existence? Certainly, as I explained in my intro, my first gut instinct is that I'm not satisfied with what I see pharmacists doing and our skills that we have, this untapped potential that we have and we're not utilizing. I think first and foremost is, do we want to change? Because I think if we don't answer that question, then the answer to every other question is very different. We're never going to reconcile, because we will always find, because really talking about AI, moving on to that right now is a bit like talking about, because this next point is like talking about AI is a bit like talking about, a driverless train when we haven't laid down the railway track. If we go and take AI right now and try to shoehorn it into existing processes, into the existing world of pharmacists, into the existing mentality of pharmacists, if I'm being absolutely honest, some pharmacists are actually quite happy doing what they're doing. If we try to pressure ourselves and overlay and impose concepts and ideas and that they don't agree with, actually we're going to have a clash and we're not going to like it. If Paul is not happy working in a pharmacy, that he feels uncomfortable, that I don't have control, I'm here to supply, to make sure that medicines are given out correctly, and I want to know that, and he's absolutely entitled to that view. If that's what he wants to do, then being personally involved in every bit of the journey is probably the best way to do it for Paul. For me, I started this journey because, look, I see a much bigger picture for pharmacy. I see that there are so many things. If I had what you guys have today, I don't have my pharmacy business now, but if I had my pharmacy business and I had the opportunities that you guys have today, I would have created a very different world altogether. Pharmacists can prescribe. Pharmacists are out there. We gave, how many flu jabs did we give this year? As part of our contribution to the NHS. We've got pharmacists going out doing diagnostics. We've got pharmacists. We've got EMR systems that are giving so much data that actually, did you know? We've got the number of patients in care homes that I can tell you who are still on antipsychotics and have been prescribed antipsychotics for months and months on end without change. So there is a role there. And we have the skills, and it's worked in our favor over the years to be able to go off and do that. The problem we have is that we're fundamentally stuck in the back of a pharmacy worrying about, did that text message go to the right patient? Did that label go out? Did I check that drug correctly or not? And what we've done, step one in our process in Titan, we didn't go straight into AI, by the way. What we're here is, if you agree with the view, with the world view that I have, that look, there is a better world for us and we need to get out of the dispensary, then the next starting point is, okay, well, how can we make sure that we don't compromise our role of distribution of medicines without being involved? Which is where our role, where our journey begins, where first off, we have to change that operating model. So what we've done in Titan, the first part of it has been all about making it paperless, making it digital, making it barcode, having role-based access. So everybody who touches each part of the journey has the right authorization and the right sign-off to be able to do that bit of the job. So we have the digital workflow, we have the role-based access, we have the control. Now I have digital control over my staff. And then you also redistribute skill mix. I'm too qualified to go and stand at the end of a process and look at a pack of sterile dressing packs to see if the right label's on it or not. You know, the job of clinical checking should be upfront, and that's what we've got doing. So the foundation, that railway track I'm talking about, that first part is really just making sure that we get that operating model right. So answering your question, how does our AI work? You know, I'm trying to get to that answer. You know, it has been that journey. First off, purpose. Why are we doing? What is the bigger cause? Are we doing AI for a laugh? Or is it, you know, so first is purpose. We have this purpose. Second, if the purpose is, right, we want to save time in dispensing without compromising, then next step is railway track, foundation, whatever analogy, metaphor you want to use, get the work streams out, get the people doing the right jobs, audit everything. Because we've got the RBAC, we've got the role-based access control over who does what. I've got the audit. I know who did what. I know when they did it. I've now got control of every bit of the journey. And now I've got the pharmacist doing the front bit. I've got a guy who's sitting there who's telling me every time I show him a prescription on the screen that, you know, 1,000,000 times when he sees a packet of sterile dressing packs, he just presses OK. He doesn't do anything different. He doesn't do anything. He doesn't phone a doctor. He doesn't phone a patient. He just presses OK. If I look at the next drug, omeprazole 1OD, he changes that 1 to be taken daily. 1,000,000 times I can see that most pharmacists do that. A few taint it 1 to be taken daily and 1 do 1 daily. But do you see, you start seeing patterns. Mm-hmm. And what we're doing is we're using machine learning to take that data and saying, well, the next time we see that scenario, could we perhaps predict?
Could I just interject at that point? So just want to explain the differences between AI, machine learning, and deep learning at this stage, in case any of our audience are confused. So AI is a broad term used for smart algorithms. Machine learning is a subset of the AI, where it uses data from previous experience to predict the future chance. And obviously deep learning is a lot more complex neural networks. It works off a lot more parameters and tries to understand the context. But ultimately, all of these are black boxes. So by that, I mean, we don't understand fully how the operations or how the system thinks. So, and I will get to this point later on. So, and I just want to ask, bring one more thing to your attention. I know your vision is that pharmacists purely do the clinical stuff, but some contractors might say, well, we get paid from dispensing. The contract is purely based on volume of dispensing, regardless of whatever our dreams are as a pharmacist. The business perspective is slightly different in that we get paid for volume, and the population is increasing, it's aging. We're getting more and more volume in, more and more prescriptions. We're getting paid less and less for each year. So we need efficiency. And regardless of what clinical services we want to do, we need to make sure we keep that volume going, or we keep control of the items. So obviously your system kind of makes that the whole dispensing process a lot more efficient, right? But it's just the next stage is where the AI bit, and I'll let you get back to your analogy on this one. Just want to get a deeper understanding of how your AI algorithm works, because that's important in understanding the legal aspects of what how it will impact pharmacists if in the case of an error. Now, I know I'm kind of going on the negative side and sound like I'm scaring everyone, but when something can go wrong, it probably will go wrong. And as pharmacists, we're cautious of everything that we do because we represent the patients and we represent their interest. So we need to understand that any software that's going to predict our behavior based on the previous behavior of 1 million pharmacists is still statistics, and patients are statistics. They can have, the reason for changing certain drug can have other context and other reasons. There may be other blood parameters or UNEs that have to be taken into context to make a change. So if you could tell us a bit more about how the AI system that the machine learning system that you use, how that thinks or how that works.
Yeah, I mean, I think the problem is sometimes we have these labels like artificial intelligence, and the thing is, in the world that we live in right now, these terms, we see on science fiction, we see on movies, TV, and we're seeing, because that's what makes a headline is the extreme things, The thing is that, and the reality is that, in our world, obviously we're using, the technical definition of our logic and our code and our algorithms is AI in the true definition of the word. However, our approach as practice, and remember, I am a pharmacist by trade, this is, it's not a technical company that's doing, I employ some very clever people who are our technical team, but I have to sign this off, and I'm responsible for making sure that we at least respect the position and the state of where pharmacy is as well. I mean, just going back a couple of stages, so what we have is, I mean, first and foremost, there is risk in the current process. The reason I went in technology is because, the pharmacy processes that I had, and I was running a pharmacy operation that was doing hundreds of thousands of prescription items a month. And, to think that actually we can have safety just by having lots of people, no matter how trained they are, to do the job, actually there is big risk. Let me give you an example. Let's jump past the stage where I had already done barcode scanning. I had already done the safety and the picking and the packing and the paperless process. Let's bypass all of that because you guys have already know us for that. So in my previous life, I built all that, right? I got to a stage where actually, think about it, a pharmacist is now doing clinical checks. That's their job. That's what they're doing. We've got warehouse people and other processes doing the rest. And you're saying that actually there's a risk in that AI could miss something or do something wrong. Let me tell you about the risk of actually getting a pharmacist to look at every single thing. The number of errors that we made before we introduced algorithms that actually help sift out scenarios for the pharmacist was so great, because what you end up with is, especially in busy volume pharmacies, without AI, if you're just relying on the pharmacist to say, check this prescription, look at it, and you give him everything, and you're working on the assumption that he's going to somehow check everything, you're increasing risk. Because what you're doing, you're creating blindness, because there's 80%, I can tell you statistically that 80% of what pharmacists check is pointless. There's no clinical validation. There's no clinical purpose. You're not using any of your 5 years worth of qualification to check that. Nothing in your cognition is helping you with it. That risk is very, very low. There's an operational task in cleaning up a dosage, checking a quantity, checking a date. Those are operational things. There's nothing really clinical about it, let's face it. But the fact is there is a significant number, significant in minority, let's call it that way, 10, 20, maybe even 30% of prescriptions that are really serious that do need a pharmacist's attention. And what we found was that if you give 100% of prescriptions to the pharmacist, they're more likely to miss the ones that really matter. Whereas if you can find a way to take the ones out that are low risk and then present the ones that the pharmacist needs to see, you improve safety. And that was proven in the model that we had before. So in many ways...
I'm going to have to, interject on this one. When you're saying you've got... the law says that the pharmacist has to do the clinical checks on every prescription, right?
No, it doesn't.
Sorry?
No, it doesn't say that.
So the pharmacist doesn't need to do any checks on the...
The law does not state that, and Paul can verify that. The regulations that we currently have today do not prescribe the actual process. I mean, Paul said earlier, I mean, it's about the responsible pharmacist, and it's about standard operating procedure. It's used as a sword and a shield. It is up to the superintendent or the corporate or the body to say, look, we've set out these procedures. The responsible pharmacist is in charge of them, and really, you can make whatever procedures, because what the regulator is doing is they're relying on you as a responsible pharmacist for you to discharge your duty as it is, right? But the law, no act, not from Medicines Act, not from the pharmacy regulations, not from any of the laws that exist today, does it actually spell out that the pharmacist shall do a particular task A, B, C, D. It's not that prescriptive.
But we would still need to do a clinical check on a prescription, right? Without doing a clinical check, you can't really get that prescription through to a patient.
Well, these are ways, and these are methodologies, and these are systems that we have put in order to discharge our duty. We have a duty of care under the regulations to make sure that we ensure the safety and supply and the appropriateness of drugs to patients, right? That's what the regulations say. I mean, the exact words evade me right now, but we're very clear about that, right? It's a very high level principle that we sign up to. How we discharge that duty actually varies from one to another. And the fact that we have the concept of clinical checks, accuracy checks, dispensing, labeling, I mean, there are some terms that are defined in law, like dispensing is a defined term and it is quite prescriptive, but that dates back to 1968 before, even the computers existed. So, but a lot of the concepts that we have are not in law, but they are interpreted in order for us to help us discharge our duties in the best possible way. What we're doing in our technology is reinterpreting the same law within the law, but reinterpreting the processes to discharge our duty, hopefully even safer than it was before.
Okay, so let's just say, for example, hypothetically, you've let some iron tablets through. Okay, it's been checked a number of times. It's been on repeat for a while, and you've let it through. Pharmacist didn't need to check it because a million times before, the pharmacist just let it through. And then it gets dispensed, and it gets checked, and it goes to the patient. And it turns out that iron tablet was dispensed, was prescribed in error, and the level should have been checked. The patient's the blood level should have been checked. Who would then be responsible for that? Would the PMR system or the creator of the PMR system yourself be responsible for it, or would it be the pharmacist? Because under your system, the pharmacist didn't get a chance to check that prescription because your system decided he or she doesn't need to check that prescription anymore.
No, absolutely. It's not, I mean, we're providing a system. We're a system supplier. We're providing a system to the pharmacy. The jurisdiction is, the jurisdiction falls upon the pharmacist. At the end of the day, the responsibility is on the pharmacist.
Okay, I get that, but you're saying that you've proven through statistics, that through previous research, that you can reduce a number of errors. Now, that's purely based on statistics. And as I said before, patients aren't statistics. There are certain reasons why a patient may be on a medication for long duration or on repeat for a number of times, but we still need to check their blood levels, and we still need to check their record with the GP to see whether they're up to date on all their tests. But if your system doesn't take that into context, and that's what I was saying, we need to understand that, does the system understand the context of the patient's results or the lab results in how the patient would react if the iron levels were high in their system? But if you're saying your system doesn't even let the pharmacist check that because you found that by not doing all these checks, they make less errors, and this has gone through now, would you be confident enough to say, okay, you know what, I'll take responsibility for that?
No, that's not how it works, Dahil. I mean, look, we are not imposing the system. We are providing tools in order for pharmacists to use if they wish. We would never suggest or recommend or tell a pharmacist that they will use our system. We're openly saying, look, here is what the capability of technology can do. Here are our experiences. Here's our processes. Here's our data. Anyone looking at our AI at the moment, is in tests with pharmacies, but we haven't launched it officially into the market. When we do, our job is to provide all the information that we have available to us and be as transparent about how it works as well. Pharmacists.
I fully understand that, but the fact is, if you're going to give that system, someone will use it, right?
Yeah.
Inevitably, someone will.
Let me just stop you there. Let me just also tell you that for a pharmacist like yourself, all right, where you have those concerns. And, there is under the AI, one extreme is you could choose not to use the AI, of course, but let's say you want to use it and you want to give it a go. You wouldn't go straight into AI, let the AI run wild and walk away. That's not how it would work, right? Mm-hmm. But let me just explain the process. So what happens is, let's say it's learning, all right? Firstly, in your parameters, you have the ability to actually have settings, okay? So you can actually, there are a number of settings that are within your control. So you can say, for example, only apply my learning, okay? And don't apply learning from another pharmacist. So if you have a locum and, you may say, I don't want to apply his learning to my data set. You could say, actually, I want to learn from anybody, all pharmacists in the country, so you can learn from everyone. So you've got opportunities to strengthen. Obviously, the bigger you go, the bigger the data, the smaller you go, the lower the value. That's an example. You've got other examples of settings that you have in terms of this patient only learn from this patient's thing, so only do things that this patient's experienced, not another patient. So there's lots of opportunities to adjust the settings to give you that control. That's number one. Number two, really important, AI doesn't mean that when you switch it on, suddenly prescriptions become invisible. It goes live. The starting point of this is actually to get the pharmacist comfortable. So you switch the AI on, the AI does its job and actually cleans up and does whatever decision making it needs to be done on that prescription, but in this kind of partial mode, presents every prescription back to the pharmacist. So you can get to a point where you can start getting comfortable with the results that is coming, still with you being the barrier and the gatekeeper before it goes out. And I would encourage all pharmacists to run it on that for a good while before they go. And it's up to them whether they feel, actually, every time I look at it, it seems to be right. I feel comfortable. It is purely about empowering you. It's about having a driver assist, not driverless. It is not driverless, it's driver assist in that format, yeah? And number three, just very quickly, there is also about risk. We automatically take off high-risk drugs straight from the offing, that there is no learning and nothing, it's completely excluded. So all control drugs, all warfarins, all epilims, anything that we believe as professionals to be risk.
The reason I brought out iron tablets is because it's a pretty simple one. People buy it over the counter quite a lot. But there has been cases where iron tablets were prescribed in error by the original prescriber months and months ago. And this is actually an actual case where if it hadn't picked up on the very last time, the patient would have been fatal because they were on the highest amount of iron in their system that they could handle. So this is a real life scenario that has actually happened, and pharmacists have picked up on this. I just want to bring Paul. I mean, we're really short of time at the moment. I just want to bring Paul into it. In your legal view, listening to what Tariq has said about about the AI system within the PMR and the potential of it making more efficient for us, but also obviously the potential for it to go wrong. How comfortable are you with working with an AI system?
Well, I mean, my concern still is around me being responsible. I think we all agree that the responsible pharmacist is responsible for the operation at that particular time. If I could be convinced, and I would take a lot of convincing, that if I say, for example, I'm working for a chain who uses the Titan system, if I could be assured that I could go in and switch the AI off for the time I'm there, so that I can take control, not of every single facet. I'm not interested in taking control of every single process. I just need that reassurance that everything that goes out on my watch, to the best of my knowledge, is correct. That's all I need. My concern still is around, I mean, yes, great, the Titan system or any further AI systems that come onto the market will have this ability to say, listen, don't just switch it on straight away. Work together, learn from it. Great. But it's going to take time. Errors will occur, and errors are going to be, if it's going to be my watch, they will be on my watch. It still sits, it's still uncomfortable, but I agree, Tarek, Gary, I agree. Pharmacy needs to change. We need to move with the times. We do, don't get me wrong, but we need the legal framework to be able to do that safely and effectively. But at the end of the day, I'm here for the patient's benefit. I'm not here to increase corporate profits. I'm not here to increase efficiency in dispensing. I'm here as a pharmacist to apply my skills and knowledge for the benefit of a patient. That's what it's all about. That's what pharmacy is all about. And as the responsible pharmacist, it is my responsibility to ensure that that occurs when I am in charge of a particular pharmacy. At this moment in time, I'm not convinced. The responsibility still rests with me. Whether or not that responsibility can be shared with the system suppliers is a completely another matter, and it would have to go in front of a judge for that to be decided. But as it stands, 100% of the responsibility is with me as the responsible pharmacist. I would not be happy until I'm completely comfortable with any form of artificial intelligence in its broadest concept, may I add. We're not going to go into the in-depths here, but any artificial intelligence I would have to be comfortable with before I could turn around and say, actually, yes, I want to take responsibility for that and for everything that goes on. So at this moment in time, I'm not convinced.
Okay. Tarek, let's just say I'm working in the pharmacy where they use PMR or Titan PMR system, and it's been through the full training and I'm comfortable with everything that it's doing. And the system does make an error and something does go out and the patient is harmed. Now, it's gone through all the processes that you say your system has gone through, all the learning, it's still gone through millions of examples of learning from previous pharmacists. At that point, would you be confident enough to say, you know what, our system's done everything it's designed to do, this error still happened, we will take partial responsibility for this?
I think this is a very loaded question, Tweedle, and I think, I'm not going to answer that because I think it makes a presumption that, you're jumping to the thing. And I feel uncomfortable that, you're kind of picking out, we're talking about stifling, we don't want to stifle innovation.
No, I'm not saying stifling the innovation. I think
we are living in a process. We're living in a pharmacy world where errors are happening every single day. Last month, I released a report of 30% of our pharmacies I surveyed, and I said, give me your GPHC stats, not our data, your stats, your GPHC statistics of your errors before our system went in. And forget AI, this is just barcoding, normal Titan, standard, out of the box. Give me your data 1 year before or previously before we went in, and give me your data since we went in. So not our data, your data, what you submit to your CQC, your CCG, and so that data showed that there was on average a 90% reduction in actual errors, not near misses. I've got even more near misses, actual errors since our system went in.
But those are to do with the barcoding and all the other processes that you've put in, right?
Yes.
But my question is with the AI, because those systems don't take away my decision-making capability. It doesn't stop me from making clinical decisions. But an AI that allows a script to go through without my knowledge, that's what concerns me. Yeah, and that's where I would want confidence in the system.
Yeah, and you will, and I would recommend you don't use it. I would recommend that if you have that fear, it is not for you. This is for, look, I I, as a pharmacist, like you, have been in that situation, and there are many pharmacists, and some of them will be on this call, listening in today, where actually they're longing and they're waiting for some assistance. And really what we have is and I wouldn't suggest to a pharmacist, look, go in, switch it all on. This is a journey that people go on. The people who are experimenting with our AI right now are those who have been using our system for almost 2 years in most cases. So they've been on the journey, they understand, the confidence has built in them in understanding the processes. And it's those people and we're very transparent about how it works. And even then, their journey with the AI is in stages, and they're at the stage where they're getting to understand how it works. So really, you get to a point when you understand the mitigations, the processes, what's going through, how it works. I think when you look at that whole thing and you experience it, it's only through that experience you make a judgment call as a pharmacist, say, I'm happy or I'm not happy. To have an arbitrary call where you don't know how it works, you've not seen the pharmacy where it works, you've not understood anything, and to say, well, what happens when it goes wrong? Who are you going to take responsibility as a PMR supplier? I think that kind of does away with actually understanding what we're doing to actually make sure that the system works in the first place, and also negating the fact that all these errors are happening every single day right now, in pharmacies. Doctors are making errors and so on. And so I think it's, and like I said, I would argue that we increase safety because what we're bringing to the pharmacists are the things that they need to see and so on. But look, these are things that we will always have a different viewpoint in pharmacy, and I've been here where, we had remote supervision. Gary was in the C&D when I went to see Jim Smith. We were talking about remote supervision back in the day. So I've been there, and our profession, the problem is we're divided in how we see or our version of what we want to see. There are those people who are, and rightly, like yourself, where you want to kind of be really convinced that something's okay until it's, okay. And there's those who are, wanting to change what they're doing at the moment, and they need the tools to help them in a safe and possible way. So I think it's really going to be a bit of a journey that we go on before we get to those kind of points,
Yep, I mean, and I completely agree. It is a journey, and there is a lot of development that still needs to go into AI algorithms and to fully understand how much it can reduce the errors. And I think when you say your system has reduced the errors, I agree it has, but I think we need to be clear that using a barcode to reduce an error is different to using an AI to reduce an error, because they're taking over two different aspects of the dispensing process.
We did
so I'll let you speak 1 second. So my concern has always been, and it will always be, about whether if a system makes a decision for me, then I'm no longer responsible for it because I didn't make that decision. I didn't get to see a prescription go through that process. And I was speaking to pharmacists who have worked in large warehouse type setup where the Titan PMR system is used and where your AI is used. And in one of the companies, they call it a clean line, where only lines that are checked by the AI goes through, and don't even know what they call the other lines where the pharmacists check it, but their stat says that the clean line has less errors than the pharmacist line. So basically, you would think, okay, that's great, that sounds great. The AI doesn't make any errors or makes less errors, but the difference is the AI only checks single item prescriptions, whereas the pharmacists check the far more complex ones. So naturally, there will be more errors on the pharmacist side because they're checking the more complex stuff. So I think we also need to be careful about the way we use the stats and how we present the information. Because like Paul said, ultimately, it's about being confident about how secure and how safe the system is, and whether pharmacists will accept something more broadly will all come down to whether me as a pharmacist going in on a day is comfortable with putting something into a collection point, having a PMR system that makes decisions for me. It's great that I can go do more clinical work. I can speak to patients. I can sit there and look at their whole medication history and see if I can optimize their medication. But at the same time, I need to know the system that I'm using is not going to make me lose my license as well. So, and I think that's kind of where my concern is. And from the pharmacists that I've spoken to about the use of AI, that's where their concern is also in that it needs to be completely foolproof. It needs to have the error rate has to be less than a human error rate, only then will people on a broader sense accept the use of AI to make these kind of decisions. And I think Google went through a similar issue with theirs when their machine learning system started working with ophthalmologists to identify macular degeneration cases. And again, I mean, this is really where my concern is. And we are really short, running out of time. I think it was 10 past 8. So just want to ask, invite Tarek and Paul and Gary to give their final thoughts on the use of AI, use of machine learning and automation, and where do you really see us going in the near future?
I'll pitch in really quickly, give Tarek a little breather for a second, and listen to the conversation. I think there was something you said earlier, Tahidal, about the pharmacies are paid for dispensing, and that's their core focus. The community pharmacy only has one paymaster, and that paymaster values dispensing less and less each year. It views dispensing as a commodity, and because it views it as a commodity, it's going to continue to pay less. So you're going to have to do other things. You're going to have to free yourself up from the dispensing bench, and whether it's using collection machines, whether it's using AI and PMR stations to free you to do other things, to deliver the care that you've been trained to deliver. That's the way it's going to go. Have I lost? I think I might have lost you on the screen.
No, it's okay. Carry on.
And the very last point is, and I made this point in the C&D editorial about 15 years ago, and I think it still stands. So in the days when GPs used to write medicines on bits of green paper, they wrote as many bits of green paper as pharmacists dispensed. And pharmacists got paid for every bit of those green bits of paper they dispensed, but GPs don't get paid a single penny for those green bits of paper. They get paid for the care they provide around the medicines they prescribe. And that's far more valuable than the simple supply. And until pharmacy moves to providing care and getting paid for care around the kind of supply process, that's when the sector's really going to take off and be able to kind of showcase the skills. But to be able to move from a supply to a care function, you need some of the technology that's kind of already available and out in the market, and become more comfortable in how it's going to allow you to change the way that you work and your processes.
Thank you, Gary. Paul, any last thoughts?
Again, I want to give Tarek a breather because he has been for quite some time talking. So, the more breaths he can take, the more relaxed he can be. So, the legal framework as it stands does not hold pharmacists in a good position for using this technology. Let's be clear on that. The legal framework will need to change in relation to this new and upcoming technology as we see it. It's been around for a number of years, used in various other different industries, and it's into pharmacy. Now, we all agree pharmacy needs to change. We all agree we need to move away from a volume-based dispensing model into a care model, as Gary has quite rightly and quite succinctly pointed out. The whole system needs to have a seismic shift away from volume into care. But the legal framework also needs to change, because as long as that individual pharmacist is responsible for everything that goes on in that pharmacy, there are always going to be reservations, because as human beings, we are conditioned normally to look at worst case scenarios. It's inbuilt, it's part of the human condition. So we'll always focus on the worst thing that can happen. And we'll always be thinking, hold on, this is my license here. I don't want to be a part of it. I don't want to risk losing my license over placing a medication in a vending machine, or placing my trust in an artificial intelligence to make decisions for me. So until we see some backup in relation to, yes, you are a responsible pharmacist. However, let's look at these different scenarios and let's find out where you will be responsible, where you will not be responsible. Things are going to remain the same in relation to that responsible pharmacist. We are going to be responsible for the safe and effective sale and supply of medication until the law changes. We will still be responsible, but we may have a limit on that responsibility. Let's just wait and see. And from the looks of it, we've lost Toidle, we've lost Gary. So Tarek.
Sorry, I am still here. My camera just died on me.
Okay.
1 second, I'll be back on again.
Okay. Well, look, I know we're kind of out of time, so I'm on borrowed time, so I'm not going to repeat anything that I've said. And I think you guys have actually summarized it very well, to be honest, Paul and Gary. So I think, all of those points that you just mentioned, stand. I think the only thing I would add is the fact that, just on one point that Tahil mentioned, about processes, I think we do need to, technology gives us so much potential. I mean, AI is not the destination, it is a tool. There are other tools. I mean, the data that we gather, and especially in Titan, where we have so much data now available, gives us the ability, and what we should be doing is deep mining that data to actually help alert scenarios about patients. So that example about your iron, reading and those kind of things, I think those can be achieved in other ways. You don't have to stand staring at the prescription when it comes in order to capture some safety. There are other ways that we can use data to identify patients, in other ways. So data is a huge way that we can actually solve, improve patient care and our contribution. I think the regulatory thing, I couldn't agree more with you, Paul. I think the problem is that we as an industry, as a profession, have been always playing catch up. We play catch up when the Department of Health cuts the NHS, the drug tariff. There's a massive round of catch up. We've got to get the efficiencies, get a clawback, because there's a clawback, we have to get our money back. So we play catch up. It's all, we play catch up on there. We're playing catch up on the regulations all the time. What we need to do as a profession is get ahead of the curve. We've got to see the trend where it's going. The trend is only going down, as Gary said, in terms of dispensing remuneration. And I think what we've got to do is really put that vision out there of where we want to be, and then recognize what technology can give us. And it's more than just AI, by the way. That's just the tip of the iceberg. It's data generally. And then the regulation needs to kind of go ahead of that curve. My worry with AI and things like that is very same to what happened with the pharmacy, with the responsible pharmacist. That went out to consultation. Paul, you will remember, there was a consultation or supervision and personal control. It was with the Pharmaceutical Society. And what ended up as a consultation to change that law gave us what was effectively a Frankenstein of the responsible pharmacists that we have today, which actually doesn't help pharmacists. It's made it worse for locums, because the superintendents have been able to waive their responsibility and put the burden on other individuals. What we've got to do as a profession is get together and understand that vision, and actually the law to get ahead, to give us a fighting chance, for that future. So I completely agree with you, but I think technology is here to stay, and we as a profession just need to get that regulation right to make sure we don't stifle it, we enable it for the better.
And thank you for that, Tarek. And thank you, Gary and Paul, for coming today. It's been a really interesting discussion. And I have got one question from one of the viewers, but we're really, really short on time. I think John Flitcroft asking if I check every bag that goes out in the pharmacy, or if I've clinically checked the prescription or accuracy checked every item. John, just quickly, I think the discussion is from my end is really as a pharmacist. It's what I can control, and where the responsibility lies legally. If I've checked a clinically checked prescription, then I'll take responsibility for it. If I haven't, I don't really want to take responsibility for that. And the discussion around AI, for me, especially because I've been working with AI myself for a couple of years now, and I've got a fair grasp of it. And I think we still need to have a lot of data. We still need to look at there's a lot of more research that needs to be done, and we need to develop systems that understand context and understand a lot more parameters of the patient before we can really say, yeah, this is an excellent tool. And like Tarek said, it's a journey. There's a lot more work that needs to be done for us to be at the destination where we can actually say, yeah, this system is, I'm confident with it, that it's going to do what I want to do. It's going to help reduce my workload, and it's going to make it more efficient, or it's going to help me see things that I wouldn't have normally seen. And that essentially big data, the machine learning and AI, that's what they're supposed to help us do. They're supposed to help us see things, patterns in our health or on a wider population that we wouldn't normally see. And used properly, it's a brilliant tool. In the wrong hands, if your only purpose is to reduce cost and reduce pharmacist hours, then it can be abused. And that's really where we don't really want it to go to. And I think that's what we need to be careful about. So I'm just going to end it there for today. Thanks everyone for coming in. And we'll put this video up on YouTube this week. And if you have any comments, feel free to leave a comment on the YouTube. And if you have any questions about automation, AI, you can get in touch with us on Telegram or on Twitter. Good night, everyone.
Thank you very much. Thank you.